Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and Ramadan Mubarak. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, speaking to you from the Muslim Media Hub. We're dealing with 30 keys to unlocking the meaning of the Quran, and today we're dealing with key number 6. Key number 6 is distinguishing between the Meccan and Medinan surahs. So what do we mean by this? Remember how we said in the previous episode that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born in Mecca. He then remained there for about 13 years, preaching the religion, but he and his followers were being persecuted. And then they migrated to Medina, where they set up a new polity and they established a Muslim community. Revelations continue to arrive from God into the mind of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which he done promulgated to the community. New regulations about prayer, about fasting. Well, prayer was already there, but more details about praying, for example, in a time of fear, like when the enemy is attacking you. How do you pray in a situation such that you maintain your safety, and at the same time you modify the prayer so you can get it done quickly and you can remain safe. Some people praying while some others are on guard. This is referred to as Salatul Khawf. So this does not exist in the Meccan situation, but it's there in the Medinan situation because the new circumstances demanded these sorts of regulations. So it is important then for us to know the difference between the two situations and the chapters that came to be revealed in reference to the different situations. Now, I should clarify that sometimes a chapter is characterized as Meccan, but that means it was revealed in the Meccan situation. At the same time, it may have within it some verses which were revealed much later in the Medinan situation. So sometimes we have to be careful about that. The reverse is also true. Further complication is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, after having migrated and settled in Medina, where he remained for the last 10 years of his life until his eventual demise, may God have mercy on him and may God bless him and grant him safety and peace. In spite of being based in Medina for the last 10 years of his life, he on occasion traveled back to Mecca. For example, when he went there to perform the Umrah, he was prevented. Then eventually he went back in to perform the Umrah. And then he went in the 8th year of the Hijrah when he took over the town and rededicated the house of worship for the one true God. There are occasions when he went back there, and in these occasions he continued to receive revelation. So there could be some passages which were revealed in that circumstance. So in terms of the time frame, we are dealing with the Medinan phase, but in terms of the physical location, we're dealing with Mecca. So do you characterize these verses as being Meccan or Medinan? They're characterizing, and the specific labeling is not so very important. What is important more so is to see that there is a gradual development over time, so that when the community was new in Mecca, and when they were not established as a polity, different sorts of rules apply to them. The same morality, like Muslims have to be moral and just and fair in all of their dealings and so on. These are broad principles of religion, and these do not change whether you're in Mecca or you're in Medina, whether Muslims have power in the land or do not have power in the land. But what changes is the way in which these broad principles might be manifested on the ground. When Muslims were without power in the Meccan phase, they were subject to persecution, and they had to bear this persecution with, they say, take some things you just have to accept with a smile. When they moved to the Medinan situation, and there they were established as a polity, now suddenly they have, well, not suddenly necessarily, but gradually there as well, but eventually they got the permission from God to stand up and defend themselves in a military confrontation against the enemies who were attacking them and trying to decimate them and obliterate their religion. So you see, different sorts of circumstances require different regulations, and it is important for us to see this gradual development. We need then to, at a glance, know the difference between the Meccan and the Medinan surahs, because this will help us to put things in place and know what is happening and why some verses seem to speak one way and then another verse seem to speak a different way on a related issue. It often has to do with the situation on the ground. So whereas the broad principles remain the same throughout, the manner of implementing those principles might change, and we need to see and recognize this change. It is the key to understanding and unlocking the meaning of the Quran. So what are some broad ways in which we can distinguish the chapters on the whole and the specific verses at a glance, whether they are Meccan or Medinan, whether they're in the early phase or in the later phase? Here are some rough guides. So in the early stage, the recitations were more poetic. They're short and rhyming, and we can see this rhythm. So you take some verses, for example, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. This is a whole surah. The surah itself is short. There are 4 verses, and the verses themselves are short, and they rhyme. You hear the D sound at the end. Ahad, Yalid, Yulad, Samad. So you hear this continual rhyming with ending with the D sound, and in very short recitations. That's characteristic of a Meccan surah. And of course, it's not all of the time like this, because we have, for example, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ, consisting of only 3 verses, and the verses rhyme and so on. So that might sound like a Meccan surah until we go to the commentaries and we realize that the commentary shows that this was a Medinan surah. Let's get back on track here and realize that in a broad way, we can quickly recognize the Meccan surahs by their shortness, by their rhymes, but also the kinds of themes that they deal with. And we will understand that better when we go to the Medinan surahs, because we will see distinctive themes there. So Medinan surahs go into detail about regulations like fasting, details about performing Hajj, details about engaging in jihad or a defense when the enemy is attacking you, and so on. So all of these are characteristic of the Medinan surahs, because they speak to a situation that did not exist when the Muslims were at the Meccan phase, before the Prophet's migration. Moreover, you will find that the Medinan surahs are less poetic. They are longer, more prosaic. They still generally rhyme at the end, but the rhyme is not as pronounced as it was in the Medinan surahs. We also see a difference in vocabulary, in that the Meccan surahs have words which sometimes the commentators are puzzled about. In the Medinan surahs, because things are more prosaic, things are explained better, because people need to know the details of the regulations, and the regulations need to be clear. So less obscure words are used in the Medinan phase. So those who are just beginners in learning Arabic will find many familiar words in the Medinan surahs. And the verses, of course, tend to be longer. The chapters themselves tend to be much longer. So let's take a quick walk through the Quran and see if we can identify very quickly which are the Meccan and the Medinan surahs. We should say actually most of the surahs are Meccan surahs, and so we can just try to identify the Medinan ones, and we know by contrast that the rest must be Meccan. So the Medinan surahs are Surah 2, Surah 3, 4, 5. Now, the numbers may not mean much to you, so I'll name them. Surah Al-Baqarah, which is 2, Surah Al-Imran, 3, Surah An-Nisa, 4, Surah Al-Ma'idah, 5, Surah Al-An'am, which is 6. We can go to Surah 8, which is Al-Anfal, Surah 9, At-Tawbah. Then we can go to Surah 22, which is Al-Hajj, Surah 24, which is An-Nur, Surah 33, Al-Ahzab. Then we can go all the way to Surahs 57, Al-Hadid, and that can go, the list of Medinan surahs extend all the way to 66. And then we go all the way to 98 and 99, and then finally 110. The one that I said is إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ, one of the shortest surahs of the Quran. Out of the 114 altogether, those are the ones which are generally recognized as being Medinan surahs. Typically as well, very quickly, one of the characteristics of the Medinan surahs is that they address believers, or they address the Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book, and they speak to the Jewish communities which were there in and around Medina. But as an exception to this, Surah 22, which we identified as being Medinan, starts out with Ya Ayyuhan Nas, O O humankind, which is typically an address that is found in the Meccan surahs, because there people in general were being addressed. So you can see that the rules are not hard and fast, but just knowing some of these characteristics and becoming more and more familiar with them as we read, we will even be able to identify the verses, so that if a verse within a Meccan surah actually happens to be Medinan, then we will be able to identify that Medinan verse within the larger body of Meccan verses. And the contrast will also be true, that within the Meccan surah, we might be able to identify a certain portion as being Medinan. A key to unlocking the meaning of the Quran is knowing the difference between the Meccan and the Medinan surahs, and being able to identify which portion of the Quran you happen to be reading at the time, whether this be Meccan or Medinan. So join me tomorrow when we look at another key, and that will have to do with the gradual revelation of regulations in the Quran, which has a lot to do with what we have talked about today. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, saying Ramadan Mubarak from the Muslim Media Hub. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum. This Ramadan, we're making history together. Behind me is the building you helped us purchase for the sake of Allah for the establishment of the Muslim Media Hub. We've started filming our television program here called Let the Quran Speak, and we're training the youth to produce other such shows and videos for social media so that we can present the message of Islam to the wider world. This Ramadan, you can help us to raise $100,000 for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Please go to our website, muslimmediahub.com. May Allah bless you and all of your loved ones this Ramadan and forever. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, saying Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and Ramadan Mubarak.